The losses against Ohio State keep piling up, but was this the worst loss of James Franklin's tenure? It could be based on what was at stake in this game.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. My name is Seyko. I am your host of the show, and help me welcome back Kyle Golik. He is the national columnist for Mike Farrell Sports, also contributes to College Football Dogs. He's part of the Maxwell Football Club, an FWAA and PFWA member, and a Green Bay Packers shareholder. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Kyle, this conversation spawns from one of your columns, one of your articles. I encourage people to go read it thoroughly. It will be linked in the description. But is this 2024 Ohio State loss one of the worst losses in James Franklin's career, if not the worst loss of James Franklin's career at Penn State, his tenure at Penn State? And you can make the argument for it, certainly, because I put it in my top 5 personally, and other people might have it as number 1. I don't know if I would go as far to say that, but when I look at this game in particular, Kyle, James Franklin and this Penn State team were as close to Ohio State as they've been in terms of margin of talent. Ohio State is slightly better, but Penn State finally bridged the gap. They were so close. This reminds me of 2017. I would say that's the worst loss of James Franklin's tenure. And then the fact that you had an opportunity to tie it at halftime and win it. Win it. If you score that touchdown with Trey Wallace at halftime instead of it being an interception, even an incompletion, the game, it hinges on just one play that Penn State could have converted and then hypothetically goes on to beat Ohio State. So I think that's why this one is so painful in the fact that they have not beaten Ohio State since 2016.
Well, Zach, thank you for having me on again. I always enjoy coming on your show here. It's up there. I mean, you can make the case that it is top 5 worthy. It was not in my top 5.
Okay.
It's tough. I mean, when you start thinking, there's about 8 or 9 games that you could really put in there, and a couple that also that I considered was the 2021 Illinois game that went 9 overtimes.
Yeah.
2015 Temple was another one of those ones that we forget. Matt Rule's Temple team, Penn State losing 27-10, and Christian Hackenberg seemingly could not stay alive in that game. No. But those games there that I omitted, while they definitely deserve mentioning, and they probably, if someone said, hey, they're top 5 worthy, I'm not going to argue too much about it. The reason I didn't include them was it's kind of like when you look at Joe Paterno bad losses. It's like 1983 Cincinnati. It's like 6-4. It's like the Toledo game. You know about them, and you know that they're there, but it's like they're like low points. Like these are the ones that hurt. It's like when you have everything on the line, and we've all been through this in life where we're gunning for something in life, and all of a sudden we get denied. That stings more than when you never had a shot at all, or you just mess up from the get-go. And that's why those games aren't on there. I think what hurts with 2024 is this one is it's everything you mentioned. You had a vulnerable Ohio State team. You're undefeated. You're at home. Penn State was banged up a little bit. I don't know how healthy Aller is. We could use the coaching cliches that no one's 100% at this time of the year. Fair. I don't know how Denai is feeling. You don't, you go through it all. But it's just felt that, in the fourth quarter, just that whole sequence after Tyler got us into the 3-yard line between the series there, you then add in, not able to do it. And then simply the defense, probably for the first time this year, let us down. I mean, you figure you have one of the top run defenses in the country, and Ohio State simply owned it for 4 first downs, 10 rushes for almost 60 yards before they're taking a final kneel, which included Will Howard's classic now slide to this. This is almost now the Will Howard game from an Ohio State lore.
In a sense, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 2 turnovers. He didn't exactly play to really beat Penn State. I think why this one hurts is Penn State beat themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that you got to live with. I asked Dom DeLuca after the game, and I asked Kobe King, they were given the old football cliches, fans, we let them down, and this, that, I asked them point blank. I stared them in the eye for each of these, and I said, what does this loss, knowing like you've been here for 4 or 5 years, you didn't get a win versus Ohio State.
Yeah. What
does this mean to you? And I didn't expect a long answer because you're really getting to the core and soul for each of those guys. And Don DeLuca stared me right back in the face and went, it's a tough pill to swallow. And Kobe put together more of an articulate answer of like,
I like Kobe's answer. I think I saw Kobe's answer going around.
Yeah. He basically was saying all our goals are still in front of us. And that's with this expanded playoff that is there. And he was also mentioning, we'd love to play these guys again. We could play them at any time. They'd play us 12 o'clock, 3:30, 7 o'clock. It happens. So again, I think that's what hurts with it, but I don't have it in my top 5. And there's, we can start talking about, I can talk a little bit about each if you'd like.
Well, we'll go through them generally because we do have to get to, of course, Washington potentially posing a threat. We don't want to see Penn State spiral out of control from this 2024 game.
Don't want to repeat a 2017.
Exactly. And that's how maybe postseason this could go immediately to the top, depending on who you ask, but maybe not the overall. If you kind of do an average, this one will be in the top 5 just because it's so recent. But if they do spiral out, let's look at your top 5 and kind of compare it. I agree with you. Number 1 all time on your list is the 2017 game because they were up. It was 21-3. There was a block punt in there, and JT Barrett looked like one of the greatest passers in college football history. Not dual threat, passing quarterbacks. You have the 4th and 5 game in 2018.
The 17 and 18 games, you could really make an argument against Ohio State for who could be number 1 there. You really can. And again, the viewers can read and see why I took the 17 one. But again, I will say, if someone says, well, I think the 4th and 5 game was worse, absolutely. I'm not going to argue it too much.
Again, Penn State leading by double digits and they blow it. Then you have at number 3, the 2017 Rose Bowl collapse. That one was I like the way that you've described it as a collapse, but that was so back and forth. Penn State was behind, they came back, and then, that is by definition there, but it's not like USC. Penn State had led the entire time. I think of the collapse as more of the 2017, 2018 Ohio State games. Number 4, you have 2022 Michigan, and number 5, you have 2021 Iowa. No backup quarter. Is there a quarterback in the house? I think that's a perfect way.
Yeah, that was that game. I think for Penn State fans, Penn State looked every bit that they were going to boat race Iowa that game.
Yes,
and Clifford goes down. That game hurt more ways. You had lost Clifford, and you also lost PJ Mustipher, and that really changed the dynamic on both sides of the ball for Penn State. And that they really didn't recover that season from that game.
So if I'm putting that 2024 Ohio State loss in there, even before anything else happens, they go 11-1, and then fine, maybe it's not as consequential. They host a college football game, it's not as consequential. But I look at this game, and it's because Penn State was so close to defeating Ohio State this time around. I'd probably put it at number 3 because we're going to talk about the future here in just a moment, but I would, as of right now, all things not even considered, I would put that at number 3 behind the 2018 and 2017 Ohio State losses of James Franklin's most consequential, worst losses in his tenure at Penn State.
I would, at highest, I'd give it as 4.
Okay.
I would still put the Rose Bowl over it. What hurts about the Rose Bowl was that could have been a big time message back to the college football playoff committee, because they had just gotten snubbed for our opponent Saturday.
Mhm.
And if they would have taken care of business against them, that also could have given the program some momentum. I mean, they were up, I believe, 49-35 entering the fourth quarter.
Another
And
double-digit lead.
yeah, 17 unanswered points. And I think what even adds, and what a lot of people forget, is Penn State had an opportunity to win the game, and Trace McSorley, much like he did against Pitt that year, threw up a prayer towards Chris Godwin and got picked off, and then USC was able to return it and set up a game-winning field goal as time expired. That's just, that was, to me, that ultimate kick. I don't think I could put 2024 Ohio State over that. Number 4 would be probably the highest for me.
No, and I can understand that. And it's really just a difference of opinion. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. Where would you rank the 2024 Ohio State loss? And where would you rank some of these other games as the most consequential, the worst losses of James Franklin's tenure? Now, the hope is that they do not spiral. But this Washington team is peaking at the right time. This is a team that is full of talent. Kyle has covered the Pac-12 for the longest time. He knows this Washington team inside and out. We're going to get some more intel about the Huskies on the other side of this break. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, and it's all on the same page where you place your bets. It's that convenient. It's that simple. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And if we look over at FanDuel.com, the lines for Penn State versus Washington are available. Penn State is a 13.5-point favorite against the Huskies, minus 630 on the money line. If you're betting Washington, plus 450 on the money line, the total set at 45.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them right now at FanDuel.com, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. The Washington Huskies coming into this one 5-4. Over the course of the season, everybody's kind of told me, generally speaking, that, Penn State doesn't need to worry about Washington. They're not the same team that they were a season ago as the national champion runner-up. And I mean, that is true. Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama. They bring in Jed Fish. That's a great replacement. And they had to make this team through college football free agency. 11, 12 different starters across the team. I mean, this is a completely brand new team, and a team that did not know how to play football together. That was it. The only thing that was hurting the Washington Huskies this season was some difficult travel. They had to travel across the country back and forth, kind of like UCLA. And in addition to that, chemistry. Chemistry was the only issue. If you look at this team from talent purely, if you just talk about which players have the most talent collectively, Washington is a top 20 team, and it's why Pro Football Focus ranks them as the 16th best team. Penn State is 6th, but that 14-point spread, roughly, is not... I don't think it does Washington justice to this point, especially with the way that, I mean, it was a close win, but they beat USC. I just think they look better week in, week out, and this is the wrong time. I still think Penn State wins, but I don't think this is the most ideal spot to play Washington right now if you're Penn State on the heels of that Ohio State loss.
No, this is a team that's really looking for an additional signature win. I mean, when you talk to Washington fans, anytime they can beat Southern Cal, that's a W. They got that last week. They avenged the Michigan national championship game earlier in the season. They would love to redo on the Apple Cup. I think if they replayed the Cougs now, it would be Huskies all over them. But unfortunately, they only got them one time. So this is a 5-4 team that they see bowl eligibility in front of them. Very veteran-laden group. Great coaching staff. That was the one thing when I was in Indy and I got to talk to Jed Fish. He was able to bring his staff almost intact to Montlake here. And, that's staff, and then he added some key pieces. So he added a couple NFL legacy coaches like Steve Belichick and Brennan Carroll. I mean, this is a really well-coached team. They're not going to beat themselves. And they have one thing that will cause Penn State fits. Their pass defense is as good as any in the country.
I'd argue it's elite, yep.
And I will say right now, look, Penn State against Ohio State, Aller only targeted our receivers 8 times and had 3 completions. Remember, I think it was after Bowling Green, James Franklin got on his, I'm going to call it a soapbox, but he talked about Amari Evans, and he said he was saying like he's grown before our eyes and whatnot. So Zach, if I read the stat here and the stat cast isn't lying, you, me, and the 110,000 that were in Beaver Stadium and the 15 million plus watching at home had the same number of targets as Amari Evans. Mm-hmm. He wasn't listed on the unavailable report. So the question then becomes, what's going on with it? Something internal, something what? We haven't seen of. It's like I'm about to go down to the creamery and put his mugshot on the back of some milk cartons because I'd like to see Franklin actually have, him in there. Another one is Julian Fleming. I thought it was a Turner at Southern Cal when he had those 2 major receptions.
Oh, absolutely.
He dropped on that first series against Wisconsin, what could have been a touchdown on the opening series. He had a pretty much a forgettable reception on his lone target for 4 yards against Ohio State. You figured he'd want more action. I think Landon Tangwell has been putting up some good stuff, and you don't. It's much like what I was seeing last year against elite competition. These receivers aren't getting open. No matter how much AK is scheming it, they're not getting open. And you know what? You look at the interception there at the end of the first half there, even though that was a freak play, that was, it was just like a microcosm of everything with the Penn State pass game and the receivers. Like your number one receiver couldn't make the biggest catch in the biggest moment of up to that point in that game.
I think that's a good point that you brought up, and something that I said all along, not consistently though, but mentioning the fact that Penn State's wide receivers, they are technically better. They're good, but then you put them against competition where it's a mismatch, and they're not. So they've shown up in games against USC, against West Virginia, because they're better than that competition. But when it comes to the likes of Igbenison or Burke, Ransom and Downs, and I know those safeties are more responsible for Tyler Warren, but they neutralized Tyler Warren, and then Drew Aller did not have a secondary option. Ohio State's allowed to generate more resources towards taking out the run game, and then Drew Aller is left. So Andy Kotelnicki can only scheme so much. At some point, you just have to win your one-on-one battles more than a couple of times per game. Penn State's not even asking the wide receivers to, and that's in respect to the Washington matchup, you could get more of the same. The reason why I'm still confident in a Penn State victory, not as I'd like to be more confident in it, but Washington matches up well defensively against Penn State's offense. The thing that Penn State will benefit from is that Ohio State, they couldn't score at will against Penn State's defense, but that's still a top 5 offense across the board. Washington has talent on offense. Denzel Boston, Jonah Coleman, Will Rogers, but they do not have a great offensive line. Bottom line is Washington's offensive line, or offense in general, isn't good enough to keep them as close in this ball game. and that's where Penn State wins in that matchup.
In my mind, another key area in this is Penn State. This is a great opportunity for them to get their ground game going again. Now, USC had 166 yards last week against Washington. Woody Marks, who we saw have a field day against Penn State, had a $123 against the Huskies. You know, Washington, I think, has two of the best linebackers in this league in Carson Bruner. If you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, yes, he is indeed Mark Bruner's son, the former tight end of the Steelers, and Alfonso Tupatala. I mean, both these guys are just all over the place. Like the back seven for Washington defensively is where the strength is. Unfortunately, they don't have the best D-line to support it, which puts a lot of onus on them. So that's where Penn State's offensive line can make something happen here. Big time, I'm also looking at the receiver matchup because, again, Penn State secondary's been good, and let's see if they can have a repeat. I mean, you brought up Denzel Boston, but Giles Jackson was a Michigan transfer that went up to Washington. He was an all Big Ten honorable mention in 2019. Jeremiah Hunter was the number one receiver at Cal. So this is a team, and Will Rogers is behind Dylan Gabriel on every meaningful statistic because he's been in college football seemingly.
Yeah, smart veteran quarterback. I will never doubt his ability to read a defense to command an offense. No, he's stout in terms of his overall ability. I'd still like to see more, also, I mean, may he rest in peace. But a disciple, a student of the game to Mike Leach.
God love Mike Leach. The big thing is with Washington is this, and this is where Penn State can really get things also going offensively. You know, they have the better offensive line. They're looking to try to get the receiving game going and the ground game going. One of the things Washington hasn't been able to do since it got into Big Ten play and against Power 4 competition, they only have 5 sacks. So they're not getting to the quarterback. I mean, they still was able to force 3 turnovers on Miller Moss last week.
Yeah, and that's difficult to do.
That is extremely difficult to do. So this is a team that's extremely talented. They're very disciplined in Belichick's system. You know, this is if Aller's going to get going again at the ground game, it's going to have to. I think it's really the offensive line showing superiority over the Washington defensive line, and really our key playmakers, Warren, Singleton, and Catron being able to get through that linebacking core and get to the next level. Because if they can't, it's going to be a game deep in the fourth quarter. And if you leave this Husky team hanging around, there's nothing more than Fish would want to get that signature win for his program.
Especially in the whiteout game. Now, I have gone on the record and said that Penn State wins 24-17 over Washington. Kyle, on the other side of the break, will get your pick, your expectations, and then how that has a domino effect on the remainder of Penn State's season. If and when they win this game, do they host a college football playoff game? How far do they get in the college football playoff? We'll talk about that and more on the other side of this break. Today's episode is also brought to you by Hims. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have time to go to the doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra, Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for that uncomfortable doctor's visit and no insurance needed. It's all one low price that covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That is HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Again, I have Penn State 24, Washington 17. I think Washington makes this a ball game. There is that bull in the china shop analogy that I've used, but this mentality that you really have nothing to lose. if this team thought it was a college football playoff dark horse or silent contender, a sleeper team, if you will, that's out of the question now with 4 losses. But I feel like this team is still bought into, of course, because Jed Fish is an amazing motivator. As you pointed out, Kyle, that this team has one of the best coaching staffs overall. This team filled with talent is not just going to sell out on the fact that, hey, maybe we didn't reach our over ambitious goals, but we can still make a bowl game. And they believe that they can finish 8-4 on the season. They think that they don't think that Penn State's that far ahead of them. They think that they're right there with the Nittany Lions. However, I still believe that Penn State has just enough to keep Washington at an arm's length. But I really think the thing that's going to hold Penn State back in this game is the fact that the Ohio State game is going to linger for at least one half. If Washington leads at halftime, regardless of the whiteout atmosphere, I would not be surprised if Penn State has to come back in the second half against the Huskies.
I have Washington setting the tone early in this game, and I just think this is a game that Fish is going to have everyone play up for, and he
needs it.
I think he needs it. It's not necessary. It's going to give him the momentum that he needs for his program, but they're coming off a good USC win, and anytime Washington can get USC, that's always an accelerant for them. I think this is going to be a game that's Penn State wins in the fourth quarter. I know no one wants to hear this, but Washington does indeed pose a threat. I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to go low scoring. I'm going to say Penn State wins on a Ryan Barker field goal, 17-16. I'm saying it's good. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think Penn State's not going to be able to vertically challenge Washington. It's going to become a compact game. I think they'll have answers for Tyler Warren. I think Tyler Warren will have a few gadget plays from AK's offense that are going to be the difference. And I think it's going to be one of those games where, Washington will have the lead entering the final moments, and it's going to be a drive where Aller connects with folks and Barker drills it in as time expires, 17-16 Penn State.
Oh man, that is going to leave everybody on the edge of their seat, and I'm sure people's blood pressure it is rising as they hear this conversation.
They probably hate that prediction, but again, look at what happened. Like last time they had a real emotional loss. We go back to 2017. Hopefully, we don't have a weather delay in Happy Valley this Saturday night like we did in East Lansing in 2017. But that they came out flat, and I think they did it one other time where Michigan State again once clipped them in the end. Both times, Michigan State wasn't even in the picture to do this. Kind of like how Washington is. Oh, it's Washington. We got this.
Yeah,
you didn't. So I think this is one of those games that Penn State doesn't find it offensively as well as it does. And this is one of those games the defense and field position is going to have to reign supreme, and special teams will make a play as well.
For Penn State, I wholeheartedly agree with you because, this team has veterans. Drew Aller's a second-year starter. I would like to believe that they're susceptible to this, but history has told me everything otherwise. And even that 2017 team that had Trace McSorley, Saquon Barkley, unfortunately not Chris Godwin, but Mike Gesicki and other veterans across the board, and they still lost. Now, that isn't the standard. That's the exception because of all of that. The weather delay, Chick-fil-A, pizza, right? Everything that was an exception, but you look at 2021 more recently, Illinois, 9 overtimes after that Iowa game, and they had a bye week to get adjusted to. There's not as much juice and most Washington. The last time Penn State played them was the Fiesta Bowl, and they won accordingly, but there's not that rivalry sense. This isn't personal, and Washington just kind of needs this, as you said, to continue to build momentum. But what I will hang my hat on is the fact that this is the whiteout game, so there naturally is going to be juice. The crowd is going to be electric, and Penn State has all of its goals still in front of them, whereas an Ohio State loss normally knocks Penn State out of the hypothetical postseason because it's 4 teams, but now the 12-team playoff changes everything, so there's maybe not as much pressure on Penn State to perform here in this case. They go on 11-1. In my mind, they go 11-1 still. They are better than all the remaining teams, and that will get them probably when the College Football Playoff Committee settles, they'll be a 6 or a 7 seed. that hosts a home playoff game. And then depending on the matchup, Kyle, when I look at it, I think they're better than Miami. I think they're better than some of those other teams, Notre Dame, Tennessee. That's in that tier 2. There's Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas still. That's tier 1. And then tier 2, I think, is led by Penn State. And then shuffle them how you want. Miami, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Texas A&M, but they got blitzed by South Carolina. And then Clemson just lost to Louisville. So if you draw the right team as that, maybe that 5, if you're lucky, a 5 seed or a 6 seed, and then get one of the lower, like say Miami's the 4 seed or something, Penn State could win that game. And then if you get hot, who knows? Like, Penn State just needs to get there.
Look, I'm a New York Giants fan. Look at 2011.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you can say apologies, but I lived the 2011 season where they were 9-7. They're arguably the worst Super Bowl team champion of all time. But again, when you get the Lombardi Trophy, it doesn't say at the bottom worst Super Bowl team ever. You're the champion, and it's the same concept here. So for me, when with Penn State here, the Minnesota game's the one that has me worried, because Minnesota just has it's in Minnesota. It's what are the odds that Big Noon's going to want to do that game? So that means it's going to be 11 a.m. in Minneapolis.
Oh no!
We're notorious slow starters. PJ Fleck's going to have a giant boat there.
He did it once. He's done it. He's upended Penn State's season once.
That's and to me, if they lose that game, because I firmly have confidence they're going to beat both Purdue and Maryland.
I would hope so.
I'm with you. You know, no one fears the turtle as a Penn State fan, but that Minnesota game, that's the one. If they lose that one, they're not going to the playoffs. I don't, because they don't have the resume. At 10-2, unfortunately, USC didn't live up to its end of the bargain. West Virginia, who a lot of people thought would be a player in the Big 12, didn't live up to their end of the bargain. Illinois is kind of fading. You don't have that win. And that's where you look at other teams and go, the Vanderbilt loss no longer looks that bad for Alabama. In down the line. So Penn State has to win out, in my opinion, to make the college football playoff. So at 10-2, I don't see it unless teams just start collapsing. And there's a bunch of 2 and 3 loss teams, and then maybe they're in. 11-1, they get in. If they are 11-1, I'm liking what McMurphy was saying about potentially having to go to South Bend for a playoff game.
Okay, so you would still have Penn State as a road team. See, I'm almost all but sure that if they go 11-1, the committee would say, hey, your only loss, your only blemish is a 7-point defeat to Ohio State, which is, at the end of the day, going to be a top 4 team in the country, and barring something crazy, I think that's good enough to say 6, 7, or 8.
I think the undervaluing of the week schedule, it's not going to help them. And again, we learned with Florida State last year with this committee, they're going to do things that you probably don't normally think, like the common sense stuff that you. So remember, this playoff is not a traditional playoff. It's an invitational. They got to invite you, and they got to seed you, and then you get to play. Florida State learned that. Penn State fans will learn the same thing. We learned it in 2016. They learn again once again. I think Penn State's going to be on the road. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they go 11-1 and host the game. But I think the allure of having a playoff game in South Bend against Notre Dame, I think if the cards line up right, it's I think what's going to happen.
That would be something, an 11-1 team to go on the road with the only lone loss, hypothetically speaking, to a top 4 Ohio State team. But time will tell, and that's why we're discussing the outlook of Penn State with what could happen in the future. But that is my esteemed guest on the other side, Kyle Golik, national columnist for Mike Farrell Sports and everything in between, contributor to College Football Dogs, part of the Maxwell Football Club. He is an FWA a PFWA member, and also a shareholder for the Green Bay Packers. Kyle, thanks so much for the time, and can't wait to see you again at the game and chat it up in the press box for the whiteout between Penn State and Washington. Thanks so much for the time.
Hey, Zach, hopefully we get our seats back and we have a great view of the game, and looking forward to the conversation Saturday.
And again, as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. Everything that's Big Ten related. I mean, there could be 4 schools in the college football playoff from the Big Ten Conference. Craig Sheeman covers all of it. That's why it's called the Locked On Big Ten Podcast. Available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.